All right. So you had said you had just finished a visit, and so
Yes, Jamie
probably a good
just
way
left.
to go ahead is, can you talk about sort of your proceedings, what you did, and things like that?
Yeah, so Jamie Morawski from SUNY came to see me. Um, and so she's developing an NIH-based ethics course, all active learning. And so she came to view my lecture for toxicology, which is all flipped classrooms. So it ended up being a journal club, and she got to see that. And then she came to my lab, and then got to see how we do like the lab exercises. What's interesting though is that a faculty member on my campus who also teaches in chemistry has just won an award for completely flipping his organic chemistry course. And so we used the time to make sure she could connect with him as well. So not only did she get to come and see me, but we made sure we connected her with some other people, maybe more in the field, for see
Okay.
how she could do it. So I think it was a pretty we made very good use of her time here.
Nice. How long was she there?
So she got here on Tuesday night, and yesterday she attended 1 hour class with me, a 3 hour lab with me. She gave 2 1 hour lectures, and then she had a couple of meetings in between with other people. So I totally booked her. That's
Yeah,
my
well, no, if you're gonna get her, use her for everything you got, right?
Yeah, and she wanted to get as much as she could out of the visit as well. And so I think she plans to next year flip another one of her classes, 20% just to start. So it was, I think, really good.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, and one of the things we hope people sort of get out of the opportunity of doing this is getting that chance to actually meet in person, because we can sit here and have these discussions all we want, but until you actually get the chance to have those conversations in person to see on the ground what's going on, it's not as complete an experience. So I'm glad to hear that that went well.
It was good.
Good, good. Yesterday we had some folks on that were talking a little bit about um, some development of active learning practice, and we had gone right into the paper that again didn't intend to have a specific paper this month, and then Greg gave us the one, which worked out really nicely. And then I was sort of hemming and hawing a bit about it, and then Greg joined the call, and I'm like, great, you can tell us all about this. Um, and it was very useful, but it was also part of a broader conversation we were hoping to have this month anyway, about assessment of active learning and alignment of what you want to do for active learning and what you actually do for active learning. This is something I learned the hard way a couple times. Um, I assumed it'd be easy. I think a lot of people assume it's easy. And then you get to the end when it's time to actually do your assessment and you realize the data you collected, it's fine, but it doesn't actually help. It doesn't actually deal with the stuff you thought it was going to deal with. Like something changed through the semester. And so what Greg shared with us was the draft of his paper, these templates that could allow guidance, student-driven guidance of assessment, that because it's got that student guided aspect to it would sort of help you with this alignment aspect. So um, I can talk about this on the broader scale, but I think the good first question is simply your impressions of what's there.
Well, I think it matters what sort of a class. Obviously, it's going to depend upon the sort of class. So for the sort of class that I'm doing right now, I don't think these templates would necessarily work. And so I started thinking about how I would be able to develop, because I too struggle with the idea. And Jamie also, we were talking about it. Oh, look, Greg's here again. Perfect person to have.
You literally timed that in exactly just like yesterday. And now here he is.
Hi, Greg. I'm Mindy. I'm at Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland.
Hello, Mindy. Nice to see you.
We were actually just talking about my just overall impressions, and I was saying that I think that the guidelines which are provided here in the paper, which you have, I think it's good for certain types of classes. Maybe it's obviously, not everything is to be good for every class. So I know with my class, I am struggling. I've always struggled. I mean, this class has always been flipped about how I can assess them. I mean, right now it's like, do I email students? And I'm like, you're not actively participating, you know, enough. It's less content driven and more actually being engaged and using the content. So I like these rubrics, just depending upon what sort of a class I'm teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. I feel like, you know, we're all trying to solve our own pedagogical and learning problems. And for me, one of the most persistent ones is like, you know, anatomy and physiology as this endless parade of facts, and how do I get away from that? And so this is an attempt to deal with that and, you know, move us into some higher level Bloom's problems. But not every professor has that as their big issue, you know. So yeah, it's not the solution to all problems for sure.
And Mindy, might you describe the nature of your class? That might help the understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I've used active learning in many of my classes. So I do it in biochemistry, but my way for biochemistry is that it's more of a flipped classroom. And so I do lectures online, the students watch them, they come to class and we do problems. And so we're not graded on the problems, it's more of like just practice going through the material. Of course, if they don't pay attention and they don't do them, then they're not going to do well on the test. So I like that because it allows them to be able to more identify where they're struggling with the material. For my toxicology course this semester, I basically, you know, I spent the first 3 or 4 weeks introducing concepts of toxicology, but now the rest of the semester is all student-run journal clubs where we are applying those concepts to like reproductive tox or developmental tox. And so we're going through journal clubs, applying that. Students are leading them, students are leading the discussions. I, of course, intervene, but it is hard to judge like a journal club. And there's no tests after that. It's all presentation based. And they do like projects and they're doing an NSF grant and things like that.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah.
And what level students? I'm sorry if you said that.
I didn't actually, sorry. They are mainly seniors with a couple of juniors. Now, what's interesting though, this course is actually counted towards our public health minor. So I have two non-bio majors in the class. So one's an English major and one's a a political science major.
Yeah.
So they really are struggling in terms of, I think, the literature, but the things that they can add for outside perspectives when we start talking about socioeconomic status, I mean, it's almost a nice balance. Like, I know they're struggling in some ways, so I'm glad there's no tests, but what they can add to the discussion is pretty substantial.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. One of the assumptions of my approach, of course, is that somewhat traditional tests are a good thing. And so for that kind of class, I would agree. It doesn't make a lot of sense to give them traditional tests. So yeah, that would be, maybe these TQTs would work for the biochemistry class, maybe, but
yeah, I think so.
Definitely not for the toxicology course. Sorry, go ahead.
So Greg, I'm not sure if we had covered this yesterday, and maybe we did, forgive me if I don't remember, the level of student or the level of the course in relation to the template stuff that you had suggested. Do you find that this kind of sort of getting your students to think with upper level Blooms, that kind of thing, using the template, is it something that's more appropriate for a lower level class simply because of the way lower level classes tend to be evaluated, or am I overthinking that?
I would say there's truth in that.
Yeah.
I would say being a sophomore level student at a community college means that you often don't really fully understand how college works, like how to take your professor's hints about what's going to be on the test. And so, you know, and like just understanding as you go through the material, what is important, what is less important. So I feel like being transparent is especially important for those students. Once you get to Mindy's kind of senior majors who have taken several biology classes, getting to that point means they've probably kind of figured out the system better, and transparency is still obviously good, but maybe not quite as essential at that point. So in that sense, I would say it makes more sense for the lower level students. And also because of the kind of in-depth journal article type analysis that you would want to do, that is, as we were just saying, less conducive to a kind of a rigid template format, maybe, though maybe doesn't make as much sense for those upper level majors.
Yeah, that's true.
And as I'd mentioned to Mindy before and to Greg yesterday, we had framed this discussion as sort of a larger question about alignment of goals to actual instruments. And so Greg gives us a nice example of the way you could do that. But we also wanted, I think, also talk in general terms about what strategies people have used for this. The basic idea, Sue Wick had told us yesterday about, a reminder of backwards design, which is, not something we need to be reintroduced to, but just the basic idea of getting those learning objectives sort of on paper, and from there being able to consider how to assess your class in a way that gets you to the goals you actually want. And as I always say when I have this discussion, you say that and I'm like, well, duh, of course you do it that way. But then it's amazing how you can lose that alignment like fairly easily. Yesterday I had sort of taken us astray towards the end of our discussion about if there was a pedagogical research in question and publication was in question, what kinds of extra considerations did you have to make? But at the end of the day, it's still a matter of, taking a really good assessment of what it is you want, and then the question of how you would get at that, and then designing from there. There's actually a really interesting example I can give you from my own work, in that we published something last year about using CRISPR in Arabidopsis, and we concentrated so much on the pedagogical aspects of things, on not necessarily confidence, but project ownership, that kind of stuff, those values from Corwin and Dolan and those type of folks. We didn't really focus on the nuts and bolts of CRISPR-Cas9 nearly as much. And then when we did the assessment, that was borne out. That we had this whole semester CRISPR-based lab, and like, wow, they didn't learn a lot of CRISPR, did they? But then in terms of the things that were related to retention in science, that kind of stuff, those were great. And so I'm like, okay, this really was a nice example of, okay, this is what we concentrated on. We didn't necessarily deliberately concentrate on it, but it's what we concentrated on, and our outcomes suggest, yeah, that's in fact what we did. But it also showed us, maybe next time we want to think more about the actual process if part of our goal is actually to get the content. The whole thing was a learning experience for us.
That sort of gets me thinking. I'm in the process of redesigning, well, I guess my department's in the process of redesigning our intro bio curriculum, but we have so many different sections of it. Every instructor has autonomy, and so next year, I plan to do a lot more, sort of like the idea you have of like a topic, but then using that topic to teach different, concepts. So I have to figure out like what's more important for me, that they get the concepts or that they understand that topic. And my hope is to have it integrated, but have through case studies and active learning. It is freshmen, so and it's a relatively large class too. It's going to be like 60 students. So I'm going to have to probably think about rubrics and ways in which I can actually assess active learning and use it in the classroom for that.
I'm wondering, for me, this is very much a problem of time management and planning, in that, my immediate goal is I need to prepare a lecture for Monday, so I come up with an activity or whatever, and then I don't have to give the test until 2 weeks later, so I worry about that later. And then when it comes time to give the test, I'm like, oh shoot, how do I assess all that? I'm wondering, do you think that's a common issue, or is that more like a Greg problem?
No, it's common.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, we could say it's your problem, but I think it's pretty. Yeah, but no matter what you do, they're probably going to say you never taught them that anyway. It's usually, we didn't cover that in class.
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
Mm.
So I think, and actually maybe I'll ask Mindy, what strategies have you been using for that toxicology class? If not the ones, if the ones from Greg didn't seem appropriate, what have you used that's been a better fit?
Well, I mean, I do take, it's a pretty big part for, I mean, again, they're not being assessed on the concepts at this point. That was the first test. So now it's just active learning and being able to apply, and they're really going to have to apply these in their NSF grant at the end of the semester. But I've been having to take the, I guess, old school approach of that. I've been emailing the students, being like, you're not really talking in class. Like, you're not participating. You need to step it up, or you're not doing well. And it just doesn't feel very good.
So you take a very proactive approach, that you're actually talking to the students in semester saying, I'd like to see you.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool.
Well, maybe I'm just being too hands-on. Maybe I just need to say sink or swim. I don't know.
No, I didn't, I hope I didn't come off like that. I mean, it's I can see merit in that. I can see them, maybe if you have a conversation with them doing that, you learn that you get someone who may want to participate, but is intimidated or shy or whatever, and just doesn't participate for whatever reason. And you can probably tease that out in using that kind of, have you found that in your experience, that people have sort of, I don't know, confessed to you a fear or something like that?
Well, they are scared of me. That is true. I'm told I'm very scary. Well, when Jamie was here, so Greg, before you got here, I was saying my mentee was actually here yesterday for my class just to observe me. And she was shocked at how talkative they were. And I frequently do have to shut them down because they get so passionate, and which is, a good thing. But the people who aren't talking, it's not because they feel dominated, because they are dominating people. I'm not sure if they're just not paying attention. So yeah, I mean, I haven't had any problems with like people talking, and yeah, I think that was the question. I don't really know.
No, that's a really interesting observation, because I mean, I teach, and that's probably a level thing again, because I'm teaching an introduction course this semester, just a basic survey course. And one of the things I remember learning the first couple of years of my job is, minimizing or ignoring the discomfort from those long, awkward silences where no one wants to answer a question. And wow, we have a lot of those in this class. Where I sit there, they do this thing. Now they're doing it deliberately because I made a joke about it. I'm like the most irritating thing you can do is have the long pregnant pause and then break the pregnant pause with, what was the question? And now I get that on a regular basis. But especially in those lower classes, I've been having trouble with teasing out some more participation. And so I hadn't thought about, for a class like that, I hadn't thought about like those softer skills as a learning objective. Like, let's say I were to say, like, it's too late now to do it, but like, let's say I went in the fall, if I taught that again, and said one of my objectives would be making a concerted effort to create an environment where everyone felt comfortable, confident, whatever. And then to align with that, I think I would take the approach you described, that you would actually, maybe after a month, maybe after 3 weeks, be like, this is what I'm noticing about you.
Yeah.
Interesting idea, actually. Because,
and I also just call on them too. So I'm like,
yeah.
So what do you think?
And you'll just pick someone at random for that?
I mean, it's a class of 16, and like I said, they all know each other well. It's a small enough.
At that point, sure.
I have no problem calling them out.
I was in another discussion. I don't think it was with Palm Journal Club, but I was in another discussion where we were talking about professor intimidation, as you just said. And sometimes the surprise we find, I know I find this, where it's like, oh yeah, they're scared of you. I'm like, why? It's me. But like,
but like, why are my kids scared of me? You are.
Yeah, and like this inability to see like the way they may look at us, or reflecting back to the way we looked back at our mentors and our professors when we were an undergraduate.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, as an undergrad, I never had any trouble just marching down to my professor's office and knocking on the door. But that isn't my students. My students, they don't know how to find my office, and they're terrified of what may lurk inside of it.
That's weird, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, to me it's weird. I'm trying to accept it, that that's their reality, and I need to make the office more inviting or something. Maybe I should put some things on the walls. I don't know.
I have a couch. Who doesn't want a couch? Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the hard thing of active learning is that like, you yourself have to seem inviting or, so I mean, it works well for my upper level classes because they know me. I am a little nervous about how to do it with like a freshman, based class.
Mhm.
And again, I think I'm just having to give up content to make it more active learning.
Yeah. I mean, talking about these goals of having students feel comfortable and willing to try risks, I feel like that's important to infuse in the intro courses, but maybe harder for us as instructors to monitor because there are more students and we don't know them as well and they don't know us as well. And so I'm not very good at checking in with quiet students and saying, hey, I noticed you haven't participated. I mean, I know I should, but I tend not to. I still wait for them to come to me.
I can't do it all.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably wouldn't do it if it was a class of 16. Like the class of 60, I know I can't do it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Which speaks again to alignment things. Like this all sounds great for every class, but like logistics are going to prevent it from happening. For instance, in a larger scale class, you can't do the same thing. If you have a class, is 60 the size you would have for like an introductory level class?
That will be my intro class, yeah.
Yeah.
Most classes are 16. My biochem is 32. So.
Sounds about right. We've been having those discussions about figuring out workloads and things like that, and we've gone out of our way to do smaller classes but more sections, which is all fine and good, but it also means that that takes a bunch of our time, and then we can't offer necessarily other things. And so one of the easy solutions for that would be, let's go in and have one intro class of a larger size. And so we've been having that sort of existential argument for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Okay. Other thoughts or questions about this particular work or this particular question, or the larger scale question in general, about assessment strategies, about alignment of assessment strategies?
I mean, I like the idea. It's just, again, trying to make it work for myself.
Yeah. I think I would need to practice with it, but I think that's true with anything. So.
Yeah, I just need to put the effort into doing it. Sometimes it's fly by the seat of my pants. It's not always the best method, but.
Mindy, I have a question for you, and of course, Mike, you can jump in as appropriate, but one of my kind of longer term goals is to consider doing more kind of oral exams, because I feel like some students express themselves best orally rather than writing things down. But I fear, among other things, I'm worried about my ability to assess oral answers because I'm not used to doing that. In your toxicology, have you been able to, like, I don't know, develop your skills to sort of assess their oral presentations? Like, has that been a process for you, or do you feel like you kind of knew how to do it all along, so that you're, as their presentation is rolling by, you're able to get down some good evaluative comments and feedback?
So what I do is, so there's always the leaders of the discussion, and then there's the participants. So the participants are the ones I've sort of been emailing and saying you're not participating. But for the leaders, I make them prior to, submit discussion questions. And then after it, I do have like a formal write-up. Like I write up like how you did and what you were saying, and you went an extra step and you went and looked at the EPA website, but you could have done this, or maybe you could have waited longer. So I do provide feedback on it because they do it more than once. So I want to make sure that it gets better each time. And then I also give them a chance, because they work together, to kind of provide feedback on each other as well, even though they have separate grades. But it's just kind of nice for them to know like what the other person has kind of felt about it. So that's probably the extent of the feedback I'm giving.
Okay. Is their peer feedback anonymous, or?
Well, it's only 2 people in a group, so it's not anonymous.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's never like me. It's usually like, because it's not like they had to work together, but they might say, oh, you know, Sarah did a really good job breaking down that intro and talking about phthalates. Maybe she could have added where they came from, you know, more of like that, which I found to be actually pretty constructive. I mean, I gave them examples, so I did say, this are the sorts of things you want to be paying attention to. This is supposed to be constructive criticism. I mean, I feel like the students generally are really good and constructive with one another. That I'm pleased about.
Yeah.
I've only done 3 groups, so who knows? The other 10 might suck. I started with the winners.
Yeah.
Then you perfect what you're doing and then can use it in a larger scale from there. So.
Yeah, and the ones who started, actually, I specifically made them like the seniors. So the juniors will be going like later on the semester, because I wanted them to see people like doing it before they had to do it.
Yeah. I do feel like, you know, more oral assessments is another good way of kind of aligning activities with assessment, because if we're doing all this active learning that involves discussion, then it would make sense to assess in that way as well. I just personally feel like I'm not very far along that path yet toward assessing.
That.
Sorry?
Yeah, it'd be hard to assess for me like a specific, like, do you know transcription translation? Because I feel like if they said it wrong, my face would be like, oh, you said that wrong. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what format that would take. Like, would it be an interview of sort, or would you just, are you talking about evaluating a talk, or how would that go?
Well, for me, what's on my mind currently is more of an interview, like where they have, I don't know, a pool of possible questions beforehand, and then they draw from a hat or something. And then it's like me and the student and a whiteboard, and I say, okay, tell me how transcription works. And they start drawing and explaining, and then I somehow, you know, nudge them here or there, and give them a hint if they get stuck, something like that. And so some people who have done this successfully say it's really cool and powerful because the students feel like it's part of the learning process, because they're actually learning things as they go, rather than just, okay, here's some sheets of paper, write down some stuff. So I think it's potentially very powerful.
I see good potential
there. Getting there is, you know.
Do the students know that it's non-evaluative? I mean, it's evaluative for your sense. So is this something they're getting graded on? I should probably have clarified that.
That would be my hope, is to give them a score like I would for a written test and say, you know, this counts.
Okay. I suppose I'm going to take it seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my first thought as you're describing it, and that's why I asked you, non-evaluative, is, they're coming in and doing this, and it's more of a free exchange, and they're more comfortable because it's non-evaluative. However, if it is straight up non-evaluative, you would maybe lose the effort that you would need to make it be. So there's probably a middle ground in there that people describe all the time, like have it a low risk evaluative, that it counts for something, but it's not like a major exam or something like that. And you probably get the best of both worlds then. Yeah,
you could certainly do it any of those ways. I would, you know, my ultimate aim would be to make it a kind of a real test worth a lot of points.
Okay.
Based on the idea that they've been practicing explaining their reasoning all quarter long with these active learning activities, and that in some sense an oral exam is a better simulation of real world issues than a written exam. Like you're talking to coworkers about, gosh, what do you think this patient has? Let's reason it out, or, you know, that sort of thing. So I feel like it's a good simulation of the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my ability to grade that fairly is very much in doubt at the moment. So.
Yeah. But I'm curious to know, I mean, in this day and age, at least K through 9 or K through 12, they do so much reassessment. And sometimes the reassessment is oral and they do a lot of this group work. I mean, I think they might be more used to like what you're suggesting, these oral presentations or presentations for grading or being able to reassess until I get it right,
Mm-hmm.
which irritates me, just to be clear.
Yeah. No, I think the students can be brought around with the right sort of encouragement, gentle, certainly at least one round of kind of low stakes testing before the high stakes.
Yeah, I think
It's
that would be
more
good.
my discomfort than theirs that I'm worried about.
Yeah, they get used to the format, and then you actually put a higher priority on it or more stakes on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on our topic today?
Emily, sorry, Mindy, can you just tell me like where you're coming from, like geographically?
What's your
Jeez,
deal,
now.
man?
So many questions.
Yeah.
So I am at Washington College, which is
Oh
a
yeah,
small
sorry,
liberal
you
arts
said that.
college in Maryland. Not touched with the coronavirus yet. That's good. I'm the chair of the biology department. I'm associate professor. I've been here. This is my 12th year.
And is Washington a liberal arts college?
It's a liberal arts. It's actually one of the oldest colleges in the nation. This is the only college that George Washington actually gave his name to. He sat in our board.
Wait, did you used to be Washington and Lee?
No, that's different. Yes, there's a Washington and Lee.
There's still Washington and Lee,
Yeah.
although they're starting to. We're having we're in Virginia here too. We're having some interesting things happening in Virginia about our whole legacy with the Confederacy right now. Oh.
I imagine.
And if you go up there, they've actually stripped a lot of the Confederate regalia, but they haven't gone so far as to consider changing the name of the school. So.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that far. That's crazy.
Yeah, that would be, I don't anticipate that, honestly, but that would be the logical end game of all this. We just canceled, so in Virginia, we just canceled Lee Jackson Day, which was a state holiday for 100 years. So.
Wow. I mean, we have a party, like a big party for Washington's birthday, like a big blowout.
That's cool.
We really celebrate him.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for the discussion.
And
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you for coming. It's really early where you are, isn't it, Craig?
It is, yes. It's 8:05.
When you first came in, I'm like, oh my God, it was like 7:45 in the morning.
Well, you know, this is my big moment discussing my paper, so I don't want to miss it.
Well, thank you guys for showing up. And I'm going to put, in a couple days, these recordings will be available on the POM website. And then other ideas for other future discussions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. Thanks,
Thanks a
guys.
lot.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks,
Nice to meet you.